And you want to grab a copy of Standard as well and the Daily Nation for this also capturing cartoons that we have today in the Standard. Edgardo has aptly captured this particular developing story. There we have Waiguru there and Arab Singh. And they're holding court, they're saying, well, they're exchanging niceties, nice hair, governor, and nice turban, deputy president. And of course, we can see the long flock of hair there is the NY scandal. We have our guests already in studio here. They want to weigh in on this and a raft of other issues as well. Remember, today is Wednesday where we get to discuss matters of security as well. And of course, also, they say corruption is a threat to security. And this also has been fronted many times here on this forum by Professor Naomi Damba, who's an expert on foreign policy, on defense and foreign policy, and also the Vice Chancellor of KC University. Good morning, Naomi Damba.
Good morning.
So looking at that cartoon today, issues of corruption, we're just glossing over them, and people have been arguing, yes, we're electing leaders who they have, you know, ominous clouds hanging over them as far as leadership and integrity is concerned. What will be your reaction, especially to that particular editorial cartoon, if you may just mount it? Yeah, there you have it. If we just want to mount it for our viewers as well.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Debarl. This week on Monday, I had the opportunity to open a seminar that is provided by KCA University to the top of our defense staff. And Lieutenant General Joseph Carson, whom watches on a constant basis, Vice Chief of the Defense Staff, his language and my language was very consistent. We synchronized on the issue of corruption. The military get about 100 billion a year, and that's a big chunk of our money. And therefore, how you spend that money, they will enhance our capability to prepare to defend this country and to cut off the fraudsters and that surrounding that whole thing. The military corruption is not a new thing. We have what is called military industrial complex, which is much more sophisticated at the international level. But we have to cut it off from our country. And so the money that is allocated for a purpose to prepare our brave men and women to defend this country must be used wisely. And I would say that I had about 6 students who were running, running for the MCS from the university. And I asked them a specific question. What is compelling reason why you're running? And there was only one student who had a compelling, in my opinion, understanding of why they are running. The rest is just about money. And unless we deal with these there are 2 issues, unless we deal with them squarely, one of them is the ethnic strife, which is created, you know, because when we look at our neighbor Tanzania, they have more ethnic groups than we have, and they don't have the kind of strife we have. We need to address the issue of ethnic strife directly on the eye, and then we need to address the issue of corruption.
All right.
For us to move ahead in this country.
Thank you. Back to my editorial cartoon. What will be your comment? You've talked about the military industrial complex, which is very key as well, because we know also when it comes to military, or when we come to security procurement, where people really hide under that particular name, because these are security issues or security procurement, we cannot really, you know, disclose it to the public. But what do you comment about that particular? What is your comment?
Well, the issue is that everybody has got out clean and they run for election.
Yes.
Okay, so the issue is what exactly is happening to our judicial system? Why these people who've been exposed and who have clearly been involved with the issue of corruption are let free to run and become leaders in this country. What is going on?
What's going on? Right. Dr. Mustafa, what's going on?
Yeah, Debarl, that cartoon basically summarizes Kenya's politics that is largely not based on issues and principles, but as Professor Midamba said, greed, material gain, and raw power. So it's really not about the people. It is about those politicians themselves. And here is the catch-22 for President Uhuru Kenyatta. This is his last term. And he has to create a legacy. He has to make a legacy for himself. And it's going to be very tough for him if it's going to be business as usual. There were high levels of corruption during his first term that nearly, well, basically stained his presidency. He has to act. Unfortunately, a number of the elected leaders are suspected or are alleged to have stolen massive amounts of money from government. And he has to deal with those people during his second term as president of this republic. Otherwise, it's going to be very tough, and his legacy might really be stained. Kibaki did fairly well, but there was still, I mean, his government was still stained by corruption. But if it's going to be business as usual, then we might go back to the Moise years when there was massive corruption that nearly brought this country to its knees. Uhuru will have to act in his second term if he is going to assure his legacy.
All right, so is corruption security or a threat to national security, I should say?
Oh, number one threat, Debarl. And you know, there's a Chinese saying that you may create walls, high walls, and have soldiers all around your borders, build those high walls. But if that guard at the door can be bribed and have enemies come in, then they're going to overrun the country. In fact, that's actually what happened in China. And they created all these high walls. And what the enemies just needed to do was to bribe the guard at the gate and let them come in. And part of the problem of terrorism that we saw 2010, 11, 12 in this country was solely because of corruption. There were people who were tasked with guarding our borders, roadblocks, but they would take 50 shillings, Debarl, 200 shillings, 1,000 shillings, and let people, suspicious people, including terrorists, into this country. And that resulted in loss of lives. And that's one level of corruption. There are other levels of corruption when it comes to, you know, basically the way monies are used to fund operations. If those are not used properly and they get lost somewhere along the way, then it means that the foot soldiers are not going to be properly taken care of. And that the issue of the Anglo leasing that came to light much later, that took place sometimes during Kibaki's time, where people like Chris Murungaru, David Miraria were actually suspended from duty. You know, those contracts from Anglo leasing that were corrupted by political leaders, by the way, it was the politicians who corrupted the Anglo leasing. They were meant for the good of this country in terms of defense, the laboratories that were supposed to be built for forensics, but they were all stolen. It's just now that the administration of Uhuru Kenyatta is actually now putting this laboratory for the National Police Service.
All right.
And that has actually, Anglo leasing in itself affected security in this country.
Let's say from Captain Wirunga.
Yes.
The editorial cartoon, first of all, then you can comment also if corruption truly is a national security threat.
Can I start with the national security threat? And I go to the cartoon? Now, I want us to look at this thing in two levels, or at two levels. One is about equipment and the men and the women in uniform. Now, how does corruption impact on our national security? look at the men and women in uniform, whichever service you are looking at, whether it's the defense, whether it's police, NYS, KWS. One, corruption stops performance. Corruption stops integrity in the service. Corruption stops or removes morale from the men and women who serve in these services. Why am I saying that? Promotions are not fair. Nepotism is practiced. Lucrative postings are given to those who belong to them. Training, career progression training is never given to those who are fit to do it, because those within the services are using corruption to reward those they believe they should have. What is the impact of that on the men and women in uniform? You remove the capacity of that service to deliver to the Kenyan people. That is one. So therefore, generally you find a service that has men and women in uniform, but who are seriously demotivated.
Yes.
But because they can't speak, we see them in uniform and you imagine this country has a very good police or defense people. That on a human resource aspect is a very serious thing, and it is caused by corruption. Now, let's come to the equipment. The military, they have an edge, because I know the processes in which they go through to determine what they want. They have a technical committee that normally sits, and then they brief the Chief of Defense Staff, who now discusses with the Defense Council. But even at the end of the day, you still hear murmurs about, this is the money that was allocated for this, but we bought this. And therefore, that diminishes the capacity of our defense or our police or whatever arm we have to do what the country expects. And that is corruption. Now, you come to the police, for example, they are never asked what type of equipment they want. And even if they do, when these documents are taken, for example, to Harambee House, the people who determine exactly what needs to be done are not the technical police officers who are in charge. And that's why you find we have vehicles that go to our borders and they're blown up, and yet the specifications that the police required were not adhered to by the people who make decisions to buy them. And therefore, Debarl, from a national perspective, and I can tell you this, some of us understand what the region does. Look at President Kagame. President Kagame has troops under the UN in Sudan.
Yes.
What the president of Rwanda does, that money paid by the UN does not go to the national treasury. So the military has been given the powers to determine what they want, so that when this money is paid to the government of Rwanda because of deploying its troops under UN, the military directly goes to buy what they want. Now, what do we do here? We get a lot of money from UN. Does the military have any say on how this money is given to us? No. And that is all about corruption, you see? So it has a major impact, one, on capacity, two, technology, three, sophistication of the equipment that we need to have, and four, a major impact on the delivery by the men and women in uniform. So corruption in this country is a major, major contributor to what we are seeing. Now, as I finish, my colleague here touched about border, how we treat people, and we've had stories where our own police officers are actually bribed to allow people to pass certain barriers, and when they get here, we hear stories. And I'll speak with a bit of competence. When I was in the Nyumba Kumi, I remember we visited 2 places in this country, and the story we were being given by the police officers themselves was how senior police officers were using their own vehicles to transport people who are paying them to get to Nairobi. Now, is this not known by NIS? It is known by NIS. Are they sharing this information with the government? They do. But because this fellow probably comes from a place where the person who is in charge is a cousin, no action is taken. Now, what is the impact of that to this nation? Terrorism, jihadism, violent extremism. Debarl, that is how serious corruption is impacting on our national security. Now, on that one, I leave it to politicians.
All right. On that, or what? On the you have to comment on it. Let's monitor that cartoon, and of course you comment on it. You have to comment on it.
No, let's face it. That's Debarl, corruption starts at the political level.
Yes.
Corruption starts, but don't speak for him. Let him say it.
No, I'm not speaking for him.
Now, this is how I look at that cartoon, and without casting aspersions. You see, first, that joke of Anne speaks volumes of what the message is being sent. Then you look at the lady saying, nice turban. Of course, our VP at one time was being called, what was his name, nickname?
Arab Singh.
Singh, Arab Singh. Now, that Arab Singh was not being said in good stead. It was meant to speak about something else. So that cartoonist is just telling us, then behind we are seeing NYS. And we know at some point our deputy president was seriously anti-Waiguru. And he spoke many times about corruption in NYS.
The NYS actually is a man,
yes,
is a man of hair.
Yes.
Of Anne Waiguru.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, that is yes.
That is the hair.
Yes.
Now,
yesterday, the deputy president has completely forgotten that, Debarl, and we are now moving on with a new governor, and we are saying we forget, let's not fight them, let them work. I mean, if this country needs to move forward, we must never have our cake and eat it. When you say corruption is bad, you've mentioned it before, follow it to the latter. If the institutions that have been given power to deal with corruption are failing, then the chief executive of this country needs to make political decisions that must deal with the corruption in this country. Because if we see this, and we hear our deputy president saying yesterday, and we have clips where he bashed Waiguru for many times, then we start asking ourselves, is this going to be business as usual? So therefore, on a political level, I think we need to see them change and say something else.
All right, let's hear from Naomi Demba briefly before we continue with our stories.
Debarl, as Vice Chancellor of KCA University, I deal with a lot of young people. We all know that 60% of our population are young people under the age of 35 years old. These young people are unsettled. They're inquisitive. They're asking the questions why, and they don't get the answer. They're looking for mentor, for wise people to advise them. But when they see that this grand corruption happened and nobody's put under the bar, nobody's prosecuted and sent to committee prison on everywhere, what do you think reflect on their mind? It is business as usual. This is how to get rich, and therefore this is how I'm going to go. So you see petty theft of a student lying over papers, of faculty selling the exams to the students and doing those kind of things, and it become the norm in our society. Therefore, the biggest question, national question, is what kind of society are we creating?
And that's a good question. And also I wanted maybe to draw your attention to what is on the front page of the Standard as well, where we have it a headline that Matiang'i's new blow to cheats and ghost staff. And this is actually a new phenomenon that we are having, where you'll be having the NEMIS.
Yeah.
And it says that this is a tough rules ministry. Ministry next month rolls out electronic database capturing every student, teacher, and school assigned unique identification number to curb fake certificates, ghost workers, and inflation of enrollment to facilitate theft of capitation funds. So in a way, this is like an index number you'll be given when you enter class 1, and you'll be having that particular identification number all throughout until university. Maybe from the issue that we're talking about corruption, this is what has really brought us to this particular front right now, where we don't trust even the examiners, we don't trust the students. There has to be some, checks and balances to curb corruption and cheating also in schools as well. You as an academician, what do you have to say about this new particular system, the NEMIS?
Debarl, we can bring every electronic system to bear. We can bring everything else. But unless we deal with people, unless people understand that this kind of behavior is unacceptable in our society as a value of this country, unless we go Singaporean way, unless we deal with it like a Malaysian, there is absolutely no system that can work. I think Captain Murung clearly indicated. You know, what's the purpose of buying this system or buying a vehicle that is supposed to be bulletproof and everything and it blow like a cracker? What's the point? And so if we need to deal with our people, I think Dr. Matiang'i is a one-man mission that is trying to deal with a long-term grand corruption that has destroyed our system. There are people in Kenya today, Debarl, that are running around with diploma from university here, from university there. That really does not exist. There are people calling themselves doctor this, doctor that. There are people calling themselves even professors. It's not worth what is written on the paper. Why is this happening to our country? And what is the consequences of our development trajectory if this is the way we go? So the president, once this all political things settle, whoever becomes the president must address issue of corruption right ahead, and also the issue of ethnic strife in the country. Those two things must be addressed.